Hello students, now we know that function is the independent block of code that can be called again and again, and our C program does not have a flat structure. It is divided into different modules or functions. And why we did modularization was because it reduces the redundancy of code, it leads to the reusability of the code, it enhances the understandability, it makes debugging easier, it reduces the development code because same function can be used again, and we have the concept of library functions where we put our functions in a library or put them in a header file and include that header file in our program. Now, as I told that C does not have a flat structure of the program, that is, all the code is not written within as a single piece of code, but the code is divided into different independent blocks, and each block is called as a function. Each C program has a function called main. Now today we'll be looking how these functions are executed. We know in the preliminary classes I have told that it is CPU who executes the program, and since our program is divided into different functions, it is the CPU that will execute a function. Today we will see the picture from the perspective of processor, how the processor accomplishes the execution of C program. Since main is the first function that is to be executed, and the C program execution actually always begins from the main. Now, if you see, I have shown a pictorial representation of a example program where I have shown that the program consists of one main and two functions, that is function 3 and function 2, suppose. So my program has got three functions, that is main, function 3 and function 2. Now if you see in the memory, these occupy different regions. Okay, now if you see main, it is again a set of instructions. So is every function a set of instructions, and each instruction is stored at a particular address. Now instead of instructions I can also say statements. Okay, now but the statements will be ultimately translated into the machine instructions, but for the simplicity of your understanding, and for particularly for those students who don't have a computer architecture background, I say that my main consists of set of statements, and these statements are stored in a memory because CPU needs the program to be in the memory, that is RAM, so that it can be executed. Now each function is loaded into the memory by the component of an operating system called as loader. Okay, now once the programs is loaded into the memory, that is, all the functions that are present in the program are loaded into the memory. Now my program, as I told you, it has got three parts, that is, three functions. One function is the main, which is always essential, and another is the function 3 and function 2. Now the different instructions or statements of the main, if you see, they are stored at different locations, starting from location 201. So this is the first statement of the main, this is the second statement of the main, this is the third statement of the main, and this is the fourth statement of the main, and this is the fifth statement of the main. Okay, now I have got another function that is function 3, and it is located at a different address, rather series of addresses. Its statements are present at different locations in the memory in a sequence, and I have assumed that suppose this function starts from address 406, that is the first statement of the function 3 is stored at 406, followed by the second statement at 407, so on and so forth, till we reach the last statement of the function, that is at address 411. Okay, now these addresses are basically in binary, but I am taking them in the decimal so that you will understand. Now I have got another function f2 that is stored in the memory from location f301 to 306. So I have got three functions. Main is stored from 201 to 205, then function 3 is stored from 406 to 411, and I have got another function 2 that is stored from 301 to 306. Each of these functions consists of set of instructions that we call lines of code, and function 3 also is a set of instructions that we call lines of code of function f3, and main is also set of lines of code. Okay, so function is an independent block of code. In a sense, it is separately stored in the memory as a block. Okay, now actually these lines of code or these instructions will be executed by the CPU, but the rule is always that C program will always begin its execution from the main. So the CPU will start its execution from the main. Now, so far as function call and return mechanism is concerned, as we have seen that once we write or define different functions in C, they have to be called or they have to be used. Now, one function can call another function, and since the C program always starts the execution, that is the CPU always starts executing the main first, so if we have to use any function in C, initially it is to be called from the main. Okay. And then once it is called from the main, that means that once the main is executing and it calls a function, the control will be transferred to that function. What do you mean by controlling, transfer of control to that function? I'll explain this in detail. Okay, now suppose initially CPU is free and it has started now execution of the program. It should know the address of the first instruction of the main, otherwise it will never be able to execute the main itself, because and that address is to be stored in program counter or instruction pointer. This I have already explained in the previous videos. So the first function that is to be executed by CPU is the main, and the CPU should know the address of the first instruction of the main so that it can fetch that instruction, decode that instruction and execute. I have written statements as I told you, but ultimately these statements will be translated into machine code, and in the machine code we won't be calling them statements, we will be calling them instructions. But for the sake of simplicity, as I have already mentioned, I have written statements. So now, because ultimately instruction and statement will be one and the same thing, because statement will be ultimately translated into instructions, and those instructions will be executed by the CPU. Now, so the first, that is the address of the first instruction or the first statement, should be loaded into CPU. Where should it be loaded? It should be loaded into program counter or instruction pointer. Okay. Once the address of that location, that is the first instruction of the main, is loaded into the program counter of the CPU will start the execution from that. Now, who will initialize the CPU to this address? This can be your question. This is usually done by the operating system. Okay, now not the compiler. This is not the job of compiler. This is done by the operating system. Who will do it? This will be done by the scheduler. Loader will, there's a software called loader that is a part of the operating system that will load our C program into the RAM, because I have already told that in order that a program may be executed, it should be present in the RAM. Now how is it loaded into the RAM? Because normally once we write the program, we save it in a secondary storage device for future use. Once we want to execute the program, it should be loaded from the secondary storage device such as hard disk or pen drive or any other external storage into the RAM. Now, who loads that? It is the job of loader. Now, once the loader loads the program into the RAM, that is, it loads all code of all the functions needed into the RAM. Then it is a job of the scheduler, that is a part of the operating system, to load the address of the first instruction of the main into the PC. Once that has been done, the CPU can now start executing main. Okay, once the CPU starts executing main, it executes the first statement, it executes the second statement. Once it executes the third statement, that is that is stored at address 203, but that statement is a call to F function. Now, call to F function is basically a request to a CPU that it should execute a particular function, not the function that it is currently executing. Currently it is executing main. Now if a main calls some other function, that is, it places a call instruction at 203 for function 3, now it is actually a request to the CPU that CPU should execute now function 3, not main. There is some inbuilt mechanism for the CPU, and it does some tasks once it encounters a function call, because it is essential that in order to execute the instruction, its address should be present in PC. So initially, as I told you, the address of the first instruction is loaded into PC by the scheduler. Once the scheduler loads the address of the first instruction into the PC, and I have made it clear scheduler is a part of operating system. Now, once the scheduler loads the address of the first instruction into the PC, the CPU executes the first instruction and it knows the next instruction will be in the next address. I am making it very simple. Okay, even though there are many other technicalities involved in this, but this is how it happens. The first instruction is executed. Now it increments the PCB by 1, and now it executes the second instruction, because it is the rule that the instruction that is to be executed by the CPU, its address should be present in PC or IP, that is instruction pointer. Okay, now as I told you, this address will change now. It will be now 202. Who will change this? This will be done by CPU itself. No need to worry about this. Programmer has not to worry about this. Initially, the first CPU is to be initialized, that is, its PC is to be initialized and told that the first instruction is at 201. This is the job of scheduler. Now, once this address is loaded into PC, the CPU fetches the first statement, decodes the first statement, and executes it. It means implements it, that is, works it out. Now after that, it goes to the second statement. It knows now, this is again the job of CPU to change the address of the address that is stored in the PC to the next address, so that it points to the next address. This is inbuilt mechanism. Now Once the CPU executes the statement at 202, it again changes the contents of PC to 203. So now PC will be having 203. It will fetch this instruction, and this instruction is a function call. Once the CPU receives a function call, it has got certain inbuilt mechanism that it carries out series of tasks so that it can execute the function 3. Note, since main has not been executed completely, why? Because it still has got some instructions left that need to be executed by the CPU. Main is said to be executed when all its statements are executed, but once we are at address 203 of the main, that is, once the CPU is at address 203 of the main, it has received a request that function 3 should be executed. Now executing a function means executing all the instructions of that function, or all the statements of that function. What will CPU do in order to ensure that it can come back to the main? Because now the control is transferred to the function 3. By transferring control to the function 3, it means now the function 3 should be executed. Now in this case, main is the caller because it is calling the function 3, and it gives the arguments or data that the function 3 has to process. That is why I have written argu, that is the arguments, actual arguments or actual parameters that needs to be that are act as the inputs to function 3, and the function 3 processes these inputs and generates the outputs and gives the results back to the main. Okay, so the calling function is the main, or the caller is the main, and the called function is the function 3, or function 3 is also called as a calling. The called function is also called as a calling. Main is called as caller or calling function. Okay, now what happens after this? How does the CPU handle this situation once it receives a function call at address 203? What it does, it saves the address of the next instruction, that is 204, in a memory. Okay, and it is possible, as I have earlier told, that CPU has an internal memory called registers that can be used to store the intermediate results that are generated when the instructions are being executed. Now suppose these registers are holding those intermediate results that are generated by the main, therefore those results need to be saved, otherwise the main will not function properly, because now these registers will be used by function 3, because now function 3 is being executed by the CPU. So all the registers of CPU will be dedicated to function 3, that is the program that is being currently executed by CPU. All its registers are being used by that program, okay, or by that function. Now what the CPU does once it receives a function call, first it saves the address of the next instruction, that is 204, in the memory, so that it can later on come back to the main. Now once the control is transferred to function 3, that is, now PC will be loaded with address 406. Now how does the CPU know this address? This address is actually a part of a call instruction, because function name acts as a pointer, and this pointer contains the address of the first instruction. You should remember this. Function name acts as a pointer, and that pointer contains the address of the first instruction. What is the address of the first instruction? That is 406. Once in a program we call the function 3, the address of the first instruction, that is 406, is stored in a function name, because function name is a pointer. Now that address is loaded into the program counter. Okay, so now program counter will be holding 406. It is a rule, whatever address is loaded into program counter or IP, the instruction located at that address will be executed by the CPU. Okay, so now the CPU starts its execution from 406, but before doing that it has done two things. First, it has saved the address of the next instruction in a memory, and it has saved the register values that are stored in different registers, in its different registers in the memory, so that when it comes back it restores itself to the state where it had left. Now, since first three instructions of the main have been executed, the CPU should return where it had left the job, and it has left the job, that is left the execution of main at address 203. Now what job it has not done, that is the instruction that was at 204, that has not been yet executed by CPU, and the instruction that was at 205, it has not yet been executed by CPU. When it receives a call at 203, call is a request to the CPU that this function should be executed now, which is being called. Okay, it is request from the main, that is caller, to the CPU that this function should be called, that is function 3. Okay, should be executed. Now execution means it will start fetching the instructions of that function 3 and execute them one by one till it has finished the execution of all the statements or instructions. Once it comes to the last instruction of that function, that statement happens to be return statement. What happens because of the return statement? As you know, in the function we have written a return statement, or if it reaches to the end of the function. Maybe there are some functions where we don't have return statement, but in those functions, once the CPU has executed the last instruction that stored at the last at the address that happens to be the last address of that function, then what the CPU does is it reloads back the address of the instruction it had saved in a memory, and reloads the address of the registers that it had saved in the memory into the processor, and now it reloads the address of the instruction into the PC, that is it reloads the address 204 into the PC, and now CPU starts executing from 204. This is how function call and return is actually done by the CPU. Now I told you, as a mechanism of call and return, whenever the CPU encounters a call, it saves the address of the next instruction after the call into the memory. It also saves the contents of its registers into the memory, because those registers might be holding the intermediate results that have been produced by the calling function. Once the return statement is executed in a called function, the address of the next instruction that was saved and the contents of the registers that were saved are reloaded back so that the CPU can execute from there. Now who will do all this? This is done by the CPU itself, that is once it encounters a call instruction. Now once the function has returned from 411, it will now, the PC will be now initialized to 204. Now again that 204 is a call to another function, that is function 2. What will happen? The CPU will again save the address of the next instruction, that is 204, into the memory, and the contents of its registers into the memory, and then whatever address is provided in the call, that is loaded into the PC. Now PC will start executing from 301. Once all the instructions of function 2 have been executed, once the last instruction has been executed or the return statement has been encountered, the control is transferred back to the calling function. And what is the calling function? Calling function is the main. Okay, so that way, how is the control transferred back? Okay, once again, it again loads back the address that it had saved and the contents of registers into the respective registers of the CPU, so that the CPU can begin the task from where it had left. Okay, so function call is basically a request to a CPU that that particular function should be executed. The CPU leaves the execution of the current function and starts now executing the called function. But before that, it does some tasks, that is, it saves the address of the next instruction and the contents of its registers into the memory. And once the now called function is executed or started to be executed by the CPU, and the CPU executes the function, and once the CPU finishes the execution of the function, the return address and the contents of the registers are reloaded back, so that CPU restores to the previous state and it starts its execution from the calling function. Okay, now this saving of the address and registers, once the call is made to function, and then loading back of these registers and the address of the next instruction into the PC, is called as context switch. It is called as context switch. This was so far as function call and return mechanism is concerned, but this is time consuming. Why it is time consuming? Because of the two tasks that it has to save the address of the next instruction. CPU has to save the address of the next instruction and the address and the values of its registers into the memory, and once a return statement is encountered, or end of the calling or called function is encountered, the stored values are again loaded back into the PC and respective registers. This loading and saving takes time, and this is called as function overhead. So calling and returning always consumes time. This is called as function overhead. Okay, this you should remember. Function linkage incurs a overhead. Okay, now we can go into the IDE and see how this takes place. Let me have main, and then I can have function 2. This is an arbitrary function I am writing in order to explain. This is a void. Now I can write any statements in it. So int a equal to 11, and I can say a equal to a plus 1. I have written random statements. This function does not do any particular thing, just to explain the call and return mechanism. Then now main has to call the function. How will it call? Suppose it has got a variable int u, then it will call a function, suppose f into. Now who is the calling function? Calling function or caller is the main. What is the called function? Main is calling the function 2. Okay, if you see here, once I trace the program, okay, because I have a return type I have set as void, I can set a return type as int. Okay, now once I call the function, see, main has started its execution. As I told you, CPU initially executes the main. Now there is a request to the CPU that it should execute the function 2. Who is requesting? The caller is requesting. Who is the caller? Caller is the main. Whom he is calling? He is calling the function. The CPU will jump into code. How will it jump? It will store the address of the first instruction of the function 2 into the program counter, and it will save the address of the registers that it had their values in the memory. And now that memory can be either a stack or it can be a TSS, task states segment. No need to worry about these two concepts. These are related to the architecture, so you can take it that that the CPU saves the what you call address of the next instruction of the statement after function 2 of the main into in the memory, and it also saves the contents of the registers, its registers in the memory, so that it can restore back to the same state as it had left once it left the main. Okay, now the CPU has started executing function 2. So now the first second statement has been executed, then third statement has, on encountering the return, the saved address that was saved in the memory and the contents of the registers are reloaded back by the CPU. Now this call and return mechanism is the inbuilt mechanism, and in this mechanism CPU will do these tasks itself. That is, it will save the address of the next instruction of the calling function and the contents of its registers into the memory, and once it returns from the function, it will call function, it will restore those values back so that the execution can begin from the calling function. Now if you see, the control again has transferred back to the main, and now main has finished its execution and the program has terminated. Okay, now function 2 itself can call function, some other function. This is what I wanted to show actually. This is called nesting of the function calls, but initially main should call the function, then it can call other functions. No function is called by itself unless the main calls it initially. Now this function can call other function. Let me define function 3 also. This is a different what you call example I'm taking. It's not exactly related with the example I have shown on the slide, because in that I did not use a nesting of calls. I have called both the functions from the main, but here I'll be showing how the called function can again make a call to some other function. Let us see, this is function 3. And I have not given the arguments, as now it can have any variable, say h. I am putting some arbitrary statements. These functions I am not using for doing a particular task. I am simply explaining to you how the things work out in C. Okay, h and k. Okay, other two variables. Now I will call the function 3 from function 2. So any function can call any function. This is a rule, general rule. Any function can call any function, but initially the call has to be made from main, because the C program begins its execution from the main. Now if you see here, I am calling main. Main is calling function 2. Now first statement and second statement of function 2 is executed. Now function 3 is called from function 2. So the return, now where should we return? Should we return to the main or should we return to the function 2? Logically it seems it is clear that function 2 has not been executed yet, and main has also not been completely executed yet. Okay, now what is done is that control should be transferred to function 3, since now here the calling function is function 2, not main. Initially the calling function is main because it is calling the function 2. Now this is the body of the function. It is main is actually requesting the CPU that it should execute the body of function 2 now function 2 is requesting the CPU, that is central processing unit or microprocessor, that it should execute the body of function 3, and the same steps are again done. Once function 2 is requesting that function 3 should be executed to the CPU, that CPU, what it does, it will save the address of the next statement, that is a is equal to a plus 1, into the memory, and it will store the save all the contents of the registers into the memory, and then the control is transferred here. Now where will the control return? You will see it will always, the control always returns to the calling function. Who is the calling function for function 3? It is function 2, so the control will return to function 2. And if you see, the control has returned to the next statement, that is after the call to the function 3. So this is an indication that that the control always returns back to the caller. Okay, and in this case function 3 was a called function. Now who had actually function 2 is executing, because its first statement has executed, second statement is executed, third statement is executed, now fourth statement is executed, now fifth statement is executed, now it is returning. Now who had actually called once it has finished execution? Who had requested for its execution? It was main who had requested, so the control returns back to the main. Okay, now since all the statements of main have been executed, the program execution has terminated. This is how the control flow takes place. The control flow actually means, that means passing a control from one function to another function means actually it is a request to a CPU through the function call that it should execute a particular function, that is the called function. Okay, now any function can call any other function. Function 3 can call some other function. There is no restriction to the nesting of the function calls. Now we are calling a function 3 within function 2, but we are calling function 2 from the main. This is called nesting of function call. Function call is to be always made from the body of some function, and the body of the function in which the call is being made is called a calling function, and the function that is called from the body of a particular function is called as a called function or callee. Okay, so this was all about function call and return, and this was all about function linkage and context switching. Okay, so function calling is a overhead. This is how actually the things take place. Now we have understood that function is an independent block of code, and each block of code is independently executed by the CPU, but there is always a mechanism. Initially the first block of code that is executed by the CPU in any C program is the main block, that is the body of the main, and main can call any other function, and that function can call any other function, and there are certain steps involved. You can see the summary is like this. The CPU starts executing instructions of a function, say main, starting execution with the first instruction of the function. If the CPU encounters, and it continues with this, and if the CPU encounters a function call, it saves the address of the next instruction and the contents of the registers in the memory. The control is then transferred to the called function, that is, the register values and the address of the first instruction of the called function is loaded into the PC, and CPU starts executing instructions of the called function now. Okay, on encountering the return instruction in the called function, control is transferred back to the caller, that is, the address of the next instruction and register values saved in the memory is loaded back into the PC, and CPU continues execution of the caller. This is what we call call and return mechanism, that is requesting the CPU that the called function should be executed, and once the called function is executed by the CPU, it again resumes its task from the caller, from the statement following the following the function call. Okay, this is all about function call and return mechanism. Now we are going to discuss another topic, that is what are the different methods of parameter passing to a function, that is how the actual parameters can be passed to a function. Okay, let us clear this, and I think we'll go back to the slide and then only we'll come here. Okay, now parameter passing is a mechanism of communication between the calling function, that is the caller, and the called function, that is the callee. Now how does the communication take place between the caller and callee? Why is a function calling a particular function? That function is calling a particular function because it needs some task to be done by that function, and in doing that task or doing that job, we need to give it some data that it will be processing and giving back us results. Suppose we have a sum function that adds two numbers. The caller needs to supply these two numbers to that function, that is the called function, and the called function will do the addition of these two numbers and it will return the results. So how did the caller communicate with the called function? It gave it some data, though that data is called as actual parameters or actual arguments. Now there are three methods of passing the actual arguments or data to the called function. The three methods are pass by value, pass by reference, and pass by address. All these three methods differ in whether the contents of the actual arguments or actual parameters change once the call is over. Let us see this practically and it will be clear. Okay, now before this let us read this out also. Passing variables of different data type. Now we can pass the data from the caller to the called function, and that data can be primitive data, that is that variables, the variables that are being passed are primitive variables, or the variables that are being passed are either structure variables or objects, or that is the user defined data types, or the variables that are being passed are arrays or pointers. Okay, so there are two methods of passing the arrays to a function, that is element by element or entire array. This we'll see later. Okay, let us try to understand what are the different parameter passing methods now. Okay, now let me define a function. I define a function, say sum, or let me give it an example function, int a, int b. Okay, as a equal to 10, now b equal to 11. Okay, now in the main I'll call example. Okay, I'll first pass constants. This is using the constants is again called by value. Okay, because we are passing the values. Here watch A and we will watch B of the function. Okay, now once I call to make a call to a function, who is calling? The main is calling. If you see, the value of the first argument is 2 and the value of the second argument is 3. The arguments that are specified in the call are called as actual arguments or actual parameters, and the copy of these actual arguments goes into what we call as formal arguments or formal parameters. So formal parameters are a and b, or formal arguments are a and b. Now these two values will be copied into memory location a and b. If you see here, now a has a value 2 and b has a value 3. This is the indication that once the caller, that is the main who is calling this function example, has passed this data 2 and 3 to the called function, that is example, and now example can use this data, because this data, that is this inputs, are available in a and b. Okay, now a can be changed, b can be changed, that is the as per our programming requirements. This is simply to show you that how main passes the data to the example. Now this time the main has passed to the data in the form of constants. Now the copy of these constants was copied into a and copied into b. This is call by value. Now actually the call by value and call by reference and call by pointer will be clear once we use variables. Okay, and we pass data through variables. Now I have two integer variables a and b. Okay, I say a equal to 90 and I say b equal to 89. Okay, now if you see, I make a call to the example, and instead of passing the constants, I pass data in the variables, that is the data that is stored in the memory location a and b. Now I am passing that as an argument. Okay, we have discussed that earlier also. This is possible. Now see what happens. Now my a is initialized to 90 and my b is initialized to 89. A and b are variables of main, we have discussed that. Now I am passing, they are local variables of main. A and b are local variables of main. Now I am passing a and b to example. Now once I pass, the value of a is 90 and value of b is 89. This value is passed to a and b, and if you see, this a and b is also 90. Now this a and b is the local variable of example, but this a and b is the local variable of main. See, I have declared two variables in main, that is a and b. Kindly be clear about this, because two local variables of two different functions can have the same name but they are actually different. Okay, so if I change a, okay, and if I change b, if you see, I am changing a to 10 and b to 11. Okay, now once I return from this function, you see the a and b of the main have still the same value. Now once I was in this function, the value it was showing in the watch window was of this a and b of the example. Once I came back from the example, the value it is now showing is that of a and b of the main. Okay, and if you see, a and b of the main is unchanged. What does that mean? That means the copy of the values of a and b was given to this a and b, and even if you change it a and b, that is, you assign the new values to them, the original a and b of the main, that is the local variables of main, did not change. This is called as call by copy. So what happens in a call by copy? In call by copy, what happens? You are passing the copy of the data that is stored in a actual argument, okay, and then that copy is received in the formal arguments. This is the first method of passing the actual arguments to the called function, that is call by value. Now let us see another thing. If I write something like this, now I can even receive it in two different variables. It's not necessary that the actual arguments and the formal arguments have the same name, because I have seen many books using the same name, and that is, suppose it has named actual arguments in a and b, and the formal arguments are also named at a and b. This creates a confusion in the student, and he might think, or she might think, that a and b are same, but actually, as I told you, two local variables of two different functions, even they have the same name, they are two different variables, they don't have any relation with each other. Okay, now if I name these formal arguments and o and n, now the copy of a and b will go to o and n. Okay, so o and n. If I change o and n, a and b won't change, as was seen earlier. You can see that practically also if you want. Now options, debug, watches and watch, I can say o, and I can say, this way it will be clear also, because I have given two different names. That now you see again. So my a and b have now value 90 and 89, and if you see, o has received the copy of a and it has got a value of 90, and n has also received the copy of b and it has got value of 89. Now since we have moved from the main to the example, that we have called example, once we watch, it will show the local and global variables only, and in that time the function it is executing, it will show the local variables of that only in the watch window. So a and b are shown as undefined symbols, even though they are the variables of the main. Okay, now I change o to 10 and n to 11, and if you see, a and b are still unchanged. This is called by value. Okay, now what happens if I do something like this? I write an ampersand here. This means now call by reference. Okay, call by reference means that, since I have already explained what is a reference variable, a reference variable is a variable that is the second name given to already the existing variable, and that existing variable can be accessed with that reference variable. Reference variable are not allocated memory, these are just the second names given to the original variables. Now if I have declared a variable like this with the ampersand symbol in between the data type and the variable, it becomes a reference variable. I have shown how to declare a reference variable. Same way I have declared the reference variable n. Okay, now o is actually now second name of a, and n is now second name of b. See what happens in this case. Now since O and N are second names of A and B, if you see initially A and B were 90 and 89. I think I'll again show you once more. See here, once I go A is 90, now B is 89. Now value of A is a local variable of main is 90 and local variable B is 89. Okay, once we call example, I pass A and B to the function. Now in the function I am not receiving the values in the ordinary variables. I am receiving these values in the reference. Actually I am not receiving the values in the reference. I am giving a reference names to A and B. That is, these are O and N are now reference variables of A and B. In other words, O is bound to the same location as A and N is bound to same location as B. Now if you see, if I change O to 10 and N to 11, you see what happens to A and B of the main. You see they have also changed. Their initial value was 90 and 89. Now there is a change in the A and B because we have passed the arguments by reference. So once we pass the arguments by reference, if we change the reference variable, the original variable will change. This is a rule itself. Now how do you pass by reference? You simply mention the data type and the variable name, but in between you keep an ampersand. Okay, now if you see, the actual arguments and the formal arguments have different name, but once we changed the formal arguments, the actual arguments also change. As I told you, different calling methods differ in the way in which whether the actual arguments change or not. If you have seen in the call by value, the actual arguments did not change, but in call by reference the actual arguments changed. Okay, so if you ponder on this, this is another way of accessing the local variables of main in another function. As I told you, the local variables of any function can be accessed in that function only, but here we have seen that we have overcome the scope of the local variables of the main. We have accessed the local variables of a main in a function example, and we have increased the visibility of the local variables of the main. That means by increasing the visibility means that now these variables A and B are accessible in example also. Since the main has not completed the execution, so A and B are still allocated. Okay, now example has completed the execution, so O and N are no longer bound to A and B. This is important. Once the example has completed the execution. Okay, since the control was transferred from main to the example, okay, therefore the local variables of the main have still what you call longevity. They are still alive. They still have that what you call extent. Their extent is they still have memory allocated to them. Okay, now this was call by reference. So in call by reference, if the change is made to the formal arguments, it is reflected in the actual arguments. Now what if I pass the address of A and address of B as an argument? As I told you, if you pass the address, you have to receive that address in a pointer. Okay, this is a rule. If you pass the address, you have to receive the address in a pointer. Okay, now since you pass the address of A and address of B, and that address is saved in a pointer, now actually the copy of that address goes into the O. Since the copy of that address goes into the O, then what is star of O? That is the another name of the A. What is star of N? That is another name of the B. Why? Because the copy of the address was passed to the called function, and that copy was received by O, and that copy can be used to access A, and the copy stored in N can be used to access B. What is that copy? That copy is actually the address of B. We have already discussed the pointers, and I think it will be easy now to understand that. Now if I say star of O is equal 10 and star of N is equal 10, you can understand now. Okay, now let us see what happens in this case. Now initially A has been set to 90, B has been set to 89, but I am not passing A and B, I am passing address of A and B. That is the memory locations to which A and B are bound. Their addresses are being passed, and since I am passing the addresses, I receive it in a pointer. Okay, it is a rule always, whatever type of value you are passing, in that type of variable you have to receive. Okay, if you pass an integer, you have to receive it in an integer. If you pass a character, you have to receive it in a character. And now this time, if you are passing the address, you have to pass it, you have to receive it in a pointer. Now let us see what happens once the call is being made. The value of A and B was 90 and 89, but I am passing the address of A, that address goes into O, and I am passing the address of B, that address goes into N. Now what happens after this? I am setting star of O, that is A, to 10, and star of N, that is 11. The star of N, sorry, that is B, to 11. And if you see, once we come back to main, the actual arguments have changed. So you can use pointers to access the local variables of main. Accessing, how I am accessing? Because their addresses are stored in O and N, and then I can use O and N to access the memory locations whose address is stored in them, and the name of that memory location is always star of O and star of N. Now if I say star of O equal to 10, this actually means A equal to 10, because I have explained in the previous video, if I store any address in a pointer, then star of the pointer is the name of that address. Okay, another name of that address. So this memory location has two names now. One is A and one is star of O. Unless and until you save the address of a location in a pointer, then only the star of that pointer will become the second name of that, what you call, of that location. Okay, and now we have seen that in call by value, the contents of the actual parameters don't change, but in call by address and call by reference, the contents of the actual parameters change. So call by reference and call by pointer can be used to overcome the scope of a variable. That is, you can access the local variable of one function in another function. Otherwise, normally we can only access the local variable of a function within a particular function. Method. These are the three parameter passing methods in C. I hope you have understood what I said. Thank you for watching.